Hello and welcome to session 2 of our weekly boot camp. Today we're going to cover elevation, talk about the computers that I left in uploading their baseline yesterday and the policies that have been created, as well as the maintenance modes. And I'm also going to show you the mobile app. So I will join from my phone from that so that you can see the app in use. So I'll do that towards as we're going through the elevation. As usual, if you can put any questions you have into the Q&A session, and we will also be recording this session, and your recording will go into the same link that it went into yesterday. Mandy's going to post that into chat now. Sometimes the copy and paste doesn't work from chat. If it doesn't, please just ask the question and Mandy will post the link into the response for that as well. I'm obviously joined by Mandy, who's going to interrupt and answer all the questions.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Should I say ask all the questions? Just volunteered you to answer them.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll relay them to Michael.
And I've also got Colin, who's just observing the training.
Yep, learning from the best.
So I'm going to get started straight away. Session today will probably take about an hour, and then obviously the usual 30-minute buffer if you've got lots of questions. But if there aren't questions or if there's less questions, we should be finished around about an hour. So I'm connected to the same machines I was yesterday. We've got the server and I've got the workstation. Now, this workstation I have logged in as a non-administrative user for now, so we can demonstrate that elevation. So if I go and try and run something as an administrator, you will see my admin prompt because I am not logged in as an administrator. So I'm going to enable elevation and we'll get back to that in a few minutes. So on the computers page, we touched on this a little bit yesterday, showing what things are. So if you recall, the 2 computers I installed yesterday, you can see the install date, and we can also see that they are in learning. That baseline checkbox has now finished uploading. So now it means I've scanned the full baseline of the computer. Now they're still in learning, so they're going to continue to learn, but I want to show you some more of those policies that got created. So if we go under my servers, we're going to see I've now got a few extra policies. I've got a policy for putty. I've got a policy for tree size. Now these are built-ins. For anyone who doesn't know, built-in applications are definitions that we keep updated. So our tree size and putty built in here, every time putty or tree size drop an update, it's captured into that definition so that you don't have to worry about recapturing the files or keeping them up to date. And we've got about 300 built-ins, not counting Chrome extensions or drivers, I think. So you can use any of them. So browsers, RMMs, Office, stuff like that. You can use those built-ins to make sure that you're capturing, well, that you don't have to worry about capturing or allowing for updates or anything like that. Now, just to clarify, just because it is built in, we don't suggest that you then run it. You don't have to have a policy just because there's a built-in. We have a policy for putty. Putty is a useful tool. It shouldn't run on all machines unless you absolutely need it to. Same as something like TeamViewer or Datto or ConnectWise or Kaseya, any RMM tool or remote access tool. The one you use, by all means, you should have a policy for. The ones you don't use, you don't want to have a policy for them. The last thing you want is to allow remote access into your environment. So that just kind of comes under sort of just making sure that your computers don't have them installed. And like I said, just a reminder that built-in doesn't mean we recommend that you permit it. It just means if you're going to permit it, use our built-in definition. Now, if we've got stuff, I'm just going to make this page size a bit bigger so I can see it all on one page. If we've got anything that we don't know what it is, we'll also create individuals for that as well. So I've got my Jam software here. And I've taken in files from there and made the own definition. We can expand and we can see everything. So obviously that's a part of tree size, but it's unique to this computer. So we've captured them in as well. Now, if I look at my workstations, I've got a little bit more And it's quite important to understand what we learn. And that's kind of one of the things I want to cover today, because that learning process, that baselining process creates these policies. Understanding what policies are going to be created will help you in understanding what rules you might have to do. And we're going to cover custom rules tomorrow. So don't worry about that. I will cover custom rules, when to use them, what you should use, all of that. But the most important thing is basically just making sure that you understand what we're going to learn. So to start with, we're going to ignore anything in the user directory. Now, we do have an exclusion to that because we do include the app data folders. But for the most part, we're going to exclude the users folder. So desktop downloads, documents, we're not going to learn from them ever. Now, in baselining, we won't learn anything from the temp directory. So ctemp, cwindows temp, all of them, your app data temps, they're not going to be learned. But you will learn them as they execute. The reason we don't do it all from the baseline is because you might have thousands of files in there that are completely and utterly irrelevant. So we just process them as they get captured. And then, of course, your program files, directories, your root of your root folders. So if you've got anything on the root of the C drive, will get captured as well. Now, our naming convention, you'll see here, I've got one called custom application name. I'm just going to open that. And we're going to have a look at what's been captured in there. Now, this is C program files, custom application name, and it is just putty. I've just put a putty in there so I can demonstrate how we process things. So for this, we processed it by taking that name there. So we'll take the folder name. So we try and do logic. Now, some folders and quite a lot of programs, we've got extra logic in to say, hey, this is this program, that's part of that program. So things like Mozilla Firefox has about 10 different directories. We link all them together and say, this is Mozilla Firefox. For this one, obviously, we don't have something for custom application name, so it's been captured that way. So it's all about making sure that we capture the folders and understand that naming convention. So if you are looking at something and it's weirdly named, it's probably because of the folder that it's within. You can always change the name of the application and save that afterwards if you want to make it clearer. And I do recommend that. So as you can see, I've ended up with 76 policies on my workstations. You're probably going to have a few more than that, but it's just an idea so you know what you're sort of looking for. And I've got Wireshark on here. I've got advanced IP scanner, hashtag shell extension, stuff like that. They've all been captured and processed just to make sure that when it comes down to securing, we've got that. And that's going to keep learning. Now, what I'm going to do is over the next couple of days, I'm actually going to invite one of my colleagues to connect to my machine and just run a whole bunch of software so you can see that in the unified audit as well. And we'll kind of go through that as well. But that's kind of the way that we're doing that policy creation. And bear in mind, the default settings are to learn indefinitely into the group, which is why all the policies have been created here. Now, we do have a couple of policies under the workstation as well. We've got drivers and Windows files. These are files that are unique to this computer. Now, when it comes to drivers, if you're running all the same make and model, you may find out that you've got ones that are kind of similar and the same like that. So you may end up merging a couple of these. You could use some of our built-in definitions as well. So if we do the application policies here, we have a whole bunch of built-ins for Dell. So if I go here, you'll see that we've got the Dell latitudes, sprons, precisions, octuplexes. So if you're using those particular models, you can use those built-ins as well. But generally, these are the system policies that we create under the work computer level itself. And they are drivers and windows that are unique to that machine. So it's not something you're going to want in the group, but something you will have elsewhere.
Do you have time for a question, Michael?
Yes.
Will ThreatLocker also learn from any custom bat files that may exist on a workstation or a server?
Depending on where they're running from, but yes, it will. It will learn them as well. So scripts that are running from your RMM get learned as well. So we're going to try and learn as much as we can to make it easier. but certain locations we do avoid. Like I said, we're not going to learn anything from the desktop and documents and downloads, because they're the kind of areas that you don't want something generally learned from.
Thank you.
The other thing that doesn't get baselined, but it does get learned, is network shares. Obviously, if you're running something over the network, when we baseline the computer, well, that computer isn't the computer that's also over the network. So what it does is, as you execute those network files, they get learned as well. So we will learn from network shares. So if you're running something over a network share, they will get learned. They'll just be learned on execute rather than baseline. And of course, if we go into my unified audit, we can always search by anything that's been denied. Any deny. And we're going to see some of the files that are being learned and being processed. Anything that's a green deny, which means it was permitted against a default policy, it's going to learn that in and process and create a policy for. And then, of course, you can always go back and see your baseline. So if I go back to yesterday, I can actually look at the baseline in my computer and see everything there. So 3,000 items across my 2 computers. It can vary depending on the computers. Mine are very clean VMs. The busier the computer, the bigger the baseline is going to be. And it's going to process all these files to decide whether or not it needs to create policies for them. Now, back to the computers page. So that's what the baseline uploads means. It means it's finished that upload, and it's got the pretty much the main bulk of the policies. The rest come from execution. Now, on this page, we can also see, obviously, the learning. We can go into the maintenance modes and go from there. Now, another useful part of this page is the ability to restart the service. So if you're upgrading, you want to restart the service. If you're turning on products, turning them off, you can restart either all of them, and that will trigger a restart for all the computers. We'll see them restart in a second. We should see the tray vanish. Or you can also restart the selected. So that'd be the same way. You just pick and choose which ones you want. You can restart the selected. Now, obviously, I picked selected there, but I could do one single computer and restart the selected there. It only restarts the ThreatLocker components. It doesn't actually restart the computer. It is just about restarting ThreatLocker. So your computer's not going to restart just because you've triggered that, as you'll see in a second. But it's just about the service itself. Now, you only generally need to do it if you're enabling or disabling products, or if you are upgrading the service. So if you want to change the version of the service, you're going to trigger a restart just to make sure. So that's kind of done from the computer groups page. We can go in and we can update the ThreatLocker version, and we can pick the version that we want, and then update it for selected or all the groups. And then once we've done with that, that kind of takes effect. What they do is they download the files on the next check-in, and then it will, after it next restarts. So if you do it from the computer groups page, it'll happen organically. People restart their computers, and if they don't, you can always just go in and, like I said, you can select one, restart service, and just restart it. And then it'll go off and it'll restart, and it'll make sure it's on that latest version. Now, elevation. Elevation kind of falls into not security, it's more convenience. And you'll probably hear me talk a lot about security and convenience and that line that we draw in the middle and try and stay on the secure side. Elevation definitely falls into the convenience side of that line. But the alternative without using privileged access management software is some people end up having to create local administrators as normal users as local administrators so they can run certain programs. So this is where elevation comes in, because what happens is we can elevate certain products and policies. So we can come in and go to my workstations. I'm going to do QuickBooks. So I'm just going to create a policy here. Excuse me. And you'll notice if you do use QuickBooks, we do have it as a built-in, but you'll also notice as a QuickBooks updater. And the reason for that is the updater itself requires elevation. The program does not, but the updated does. So I'm just going to add that policy in now. And you're going to see the QuickBooks, and you're going to notice the elevation tag next to it. That just means I can preemptively update certain programs. Now, I don't have QuickBooks, so I won't be able to demonstrate that, but I can demonstrate it with another program. But before I do that, I just want to show, again, going in to here, I am not an administrator. If I know my admin password, obviously I can type it in. If I don't, I can say no. And once I've got elevation enabled, I'm going to get this pop-up saying that I can request elevation. And then I can request elevation and say what I need to. I can send that request. And like all requests, we're going to find they're going into the approval center, emails, tickets. We'll cover setting that up on Thursday, but basically we're going to get that request to elevate. And in here, we can go through and we can see it's matching PowerShell. I can use my suggested ring fencing policy. I can have my own. I can permit without restrictions. I can decide if it's only a single computer that needs to elevate it. Or in this case, because I'm going to see it's PowerShell, go, no, you're not allowed it. And I could say no. And I can reject that request for elevation on there. And then, of course, the user can still elevate if they know the admin credentials, but they're not going to be able to elevate it automatically. Now, if we go into command prompt, and I go to command prompt here, I'm just going to edit this one. I don't advise doing this, but it's a great demonstration tool. I'm just going to enable elevation on this. So I'm now going to be allowing elevation on a very particular program. In this case, command prompt. I'll deploy my policies. I'll give them a minute to download. And then the user will be able to elevate command prompt without having to be prompted for a username and password. So they will be able to run it. And this works well on those programs that need elevation, whether it's for the updater or for the actual running of the program. Let's see if I'm impatient. Sometimes I am, or as administrator. No, I'm too impatient. We'll give that another minute. And then we'll go from there. Now, you can preemptively set up these policies, and then you'll be able to see they get elevated. We'll give that a minute.
Yes, while you are waiting for your elevation to kick in, can you touch on the difference with the ring fence and built-in pieces in the brackets there on your policies?
So these are just names. They're just the names of the policies. I can take them away, but these are the policies that come as standard. And they're named that way just so you can tell the difference between that it's a built-in app. I highly recommend when creating a policy to name the policy the same as the application, because the application name should be named something that means something to you. So you name the policy, and by default they are. All policies are named the same as the application they're for. With the difference of the ring fencing ones, these are the default policies that come with a group, and they're just to let you know that they're ring fenced straight from the start. So the name of the policy doesn't actually make it ring fenced. It's just to let you know that it's a default policy and it was ring fenced for you. The main thing you want to look at is the application name beneath it, which obviously the built-in next to that application name means that it's a built-in app. And the ring fenced icon over here lets you know that the policy itself is ring fenced.
Thank you, Michael.
Let's see if I'm still impatient. I should be good. There we go. For my convenience, it's been elevated. I am now running command prompt as an administrator, even though I am not an administrator. Now, it's quite important here. If I type who am I, you're going to see I'm still logged in as the same person. If I run command prompt without administrator or PowerShell, because we know I can't elevate that. I say who am I? You will see I am the same user. My user not a member of administrators. Is not a member. Michael.user is not a domain, is not a local admin here. And obviously we know I'm not a domain admin because I couldn't elevate things automatically. It doesn't add the user to the local admins group. It merely gives them the ability to run this as an elevated user. So that's how we set up the policies. Now, the other use is in blanket elevation. So I'm going to open up my maintenance modes here. And we're going to cover more maintenance modes as we go through later today. But for now, I'm going to start with elevation. So we're going to focus mostly on elevation. Elevation mode in a maintenance schedule means I am blanket elevation. So I'm going to apply that, make sure I'm on the right computer, all users, and add that maintenance schedule. So I've checked a box here, allow the user to end the schedule from the computer. Very similar to how I did it with the uninstalling, turning off tamper protection yesterday. This is just going to let me be able to end it. It's going to have a pop-up on the computer and I will be allowed to end that elevation. And once that kicks in, I'm going to be able to elevate anything on the computer. It's basically going to make it like I'm an administrator. So here we go. We've got it open. I can now elevate PowerShell. I can elevate Notepad. I can elevate all the programs that I need to elevate, even though I'm not an administrator. This is especially useful as an engineer, because if you are working on a machine, sometimes elevating the user just so you can get through, set the IP address and stuff like that is a very useful tool. And it's one of the most common things you're going to use. You're going to turn on that maintenance mode. Now, if the machine was already secured, let's just secure that machine, enable protection. It's going to disable all my maintenance modes. So I've just enabled security. I'm on here. And what I'm going to do is at this point, I'm going to join the Zoom from my mobile phone as well, because this kind of ties in with the mobile app. So just bear with me for a second as my phone joins. Zoom. Apologies, I should have joined this beforehand. So I'm joining my iPhone. This app is available on Android as well. Apologies, it's making me actually sign into the app. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a second while my app decides if I'm that I have to register for this. So we're going to come back to that in a second. But one of the most useful things, and we can do it from here as well, when your computer is secured, you're not able to run things that haven't already got a policy. And we'll cover that more as we secure the machines on Thursday properly. But as an engineer, you sometimes go over to a machine and have to run your diagnostic tools. So having the elevation mode turned on, and also just turning on monitor only. Monitor only means that the computer will be able to run any application it doesn't have a policy for that would normally have been blocked, but it won't learn them. So it's just monitor only, and it's going to let you, you'll have to use me. Oh. Apologies, we've just got the phone added. So having monitor only and elevation together means that you can run your technician tools and be able to run any program, whether it's permitted or not. And then you can obviously end them. I always recommend leaving them on the screen because it does mean that you will be able to end them when you finish, because they're by default, they go for an hour. You can extend it, but if you do finish in half an hour, you want to be able to end them. And just remember then you can run anything you want as an administrator. So you'll be able to run all the tools you run for diagnostics and everything else, and you'll be able to do that and without it learning in monitor only and as an admin, even though you're logged in as a user. So I'm just going to show the mobile app at this point. It's not promoting me.
Because you're logged in as a regular user, not a host.
I should be able to promote panelists.
Yeah. Sorry, Zoom is being.
Yeah, Zoom is not letting my mobile app in. Okay, I was going to demonstrate the mobile app because you can actually trigger this on the computer with a click of a button, but for some reason it's not letting me. Oh, there we go. Panelist. So I do apologize.
Zoom is a little delayed.
Zoom is being very strange. So I'm going to share my screen. Start the broadcast. Let's have a 3-second countdown. Okay, so you should be able to see my phone screen now. And I'm just going to open up ThreatLocker. I'm going to log in as my user. Training.
Hey, we see it, Michael.
Perfect. I'll be logged in a few minutes. There we go.
Oh, they're testing alerts right now on the app.
Yeah. Forgive me for that. I should have said not allowed. Okay, so we can see the computers that I've got here. I'm logged in as my trainee, and you can see Michael Workstation, this one here. Now we can see that I'm in monitor and elevation. I click that button and it will end monitor only. And I can also do the same with elevation. So this is why I wanted to show the mobile app. Once we've logged into the mobile app, you can use your same two-factor or MFA that you've got. If you've got one-time code, duo pushes, SMS, you can have all them to log in as well. It uses the same login that you use in for the portal. Now, if you are an engineer and you've got this logged in, you walk up to the computer, you just turn on monitor only, you can turn on elevation, and then you're good to go. That computer is now doing everything that you want it to do. You're able to run everything the same as if you've logged into the portal. So the reason the mobile app is important here is your engineers can have it on them and they can very quickly be able to enable these two methods that are brilliant for engineers. Now, obviously, if they're already in learning, it's less relevant, but if they're not using that monitor only, and then of course, the elevation is important. Now you can search. So if you just want to search for the workstation, we can search for that. We can see that single workstation. You can search for the customer. So if I just want to search for new product, I can search the customer name and see all the computers within that customer.
It also searches computer group, Michael, even though the group is not listed. So if you know the group your computer is in.
See, I didn't know that. Thank you, Maddie.
Yes.
So yeah, you can also search the group to be able to see everything. So you could search for servers and then you're just looking at all your servers. And of course, like I said, those groups, workstations and servers are the default across all your customers. So you're going to be able to see all the servers unless you've moved them into different groups. So the app is very useful for very quickly being able to navigate and enable those methods and stuff like that. And of course, you can log out from there, and coming soon will be approvals. I'm running the beta version of the app, apparently.
Yes, you are.
Hence all those random pop-ups. But yes, we're also going to have an approval center in the mobile app coming soon. Nobody else has been told. So
So
there we
just
go.
between us.
Yeah, keep it quiet for a while. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And of course, I've refreshed now. You can see these are the ones that are accessed by the mobile phone, and it is running. And like I said, I do recommend ending them when you finish. Otherwise, you're leaving them in elevation. And even if it is only for 5 minutes, you don't want to leave in your computer in monitor only or elevation any longer than you have to. So you can click end from the computer itself. And it's also worth just closing anything that you had open as an administrator. because you don't want to leave them with it being open. Computer should be back in secured mode. Okay, so we can also access some of these from here. So I can switch to monitor directly from this dropdown. And we can also disable protection. And you'll notice that you can turn it into monitor only, back into learning based on the group settings, and disabling tamper protection from here. Now, let's talk about the rest of the maintenance modes, because the maintenance modes are very important for your computer. So we've covered the elevation mode. Think of it as a blanket elevation. It's going to elevate every program as that user, and it's going to allow you to be able to just run whatever you need as the admin, but you're still as a user. Kind of limit it to when your engineers are on the machine. There's not very many calls for you to have to do that for a user. Installation and learning. So they do very similar things. Installation mode will learn into a program, a particular application. We can create a new application, or we can pick an existing one. So we could say Pharmatech there, and I could do installation mode into that, which means I'm not going to be getting things blocked. Again, only really used once you've gone into secured mode, because if you're in learning already, you're not going to be enabling installation mode. So installation mode is going to capture all the files that are changed or added to the machine during the window. So I'm just going to go for an action type here of install. I should have some on my machine. Yeah, these are install action types. So these are files that have changed on my machine, and this is at 1:05 p.m. So if I was into install mode and I run an update on a piece of software or a new install mode is the one I'm going to use. That's going to capture all those new and changed files. Now, learning mode, bear in mind that goes into a specific application. Learning mode can also go into a specific application, but it can also go into automatic. And that's where we're going into the automatic settings that we spoke about before, where we learn for the whole group, the computer, or just assistant policies. So they can be quite useful if you've taken it out a bit early, like me, and you need to put it back into automatic for the computer group for the next 10 years. Just to make sure I'm going to stay in learning mode for a while because I forgot and I meant to take it out. Now, I can also do learning into a particular application, as we did before, and learning is slightly different to install mode with the fact that it's, what did someone describe it to me as recently? It's the oops method. If you're not doing learning for the group, which generally if you're putting it back into learning for the group, it's oops, I didn't mean to secure it so quickly. It's also, oh, I have my computer in monitor only and installed a new piece of software. So what it does is it captures all the installs, the same as installation, but it also captures any deny that hits that default policy. So if there's existing files, which is why I thought it was quite funny that somebody called it the oops method, because it really is that you've forgotten to do something. You've taken it out of secured too early, or sorry, put it into secured too early, or you've installed a program in monitor only and you need to learn it and the files already exist. So it will learn anything that would have normally hit that default deny policy. It won't learn the explicit denies, but it will learn the default hit policy denies. So we can see them, obviously, that's that any deny. And it will learn these ones that are green, not the red ones, but it will learn the green. So it's very important to understand the difference between them. 99% of the time, you only have to run installation mode. But if you do happen to make a mistake, you can always use learning to go back in. The next one is monitor only, which we've discussed. Monitor only is quite simply, it won't block anything unless the policy is set to secured, which we'll cover more as we go forward. But pretty much if it's hitting that default, it's going to be allowed but not learned. So very useful if you need to run some temporary software on a machine, say you're diagnosing issues and you want to run PuTTY and advanced IP scanner and all of them. You don't want them learned, you just want to run them. So you stick it into monitor only and you can just run what you like. Nothing gets learned. As soon as you're secured, they go back to being denied. And then, of course, the last one is tamper protection disabled. Tamper protection disabled is the part that allows us to alter the files. So I'm not an administrator, so let me just turn on elevation and add that in so I can go into services. Command prompt. Oh, I could have done command prompt. I already had a policy for that. Forgot about that. So if I try and do net stop ThreatLocker service, I have no access to do that. If I try and stop it in services, service, I don't have the option to stop it. I don't have the option to change it in any way. I can't alter the files. I can't alter the registry. I'm blocked from doing that. And not just because I'm not an administrator, because obviously I just run services as an administrator. I can stop other ones, but I don't have the permission to do that. So if you want to diagnose an issue and aren't certain if ThreatLocker is the cause, you're going to want to turn off tamper protection. And that's when you're able to go at that maintenance and you can disable tamper protection, and then you'll be able to make changes to the service and make it stop. Patient. Now we can stop and start it. As normal. So tamper protection is all about protecting ThreatLocker from being uninstalled. This is where you want to make sure that if you just need to stop it, you don't want to leave it on. You want to only use it when you're needing it and then turn it off when you're done. Because obviously it's the part that stops ThreatLocker from being uninstalled. It's this part that stops ThreatLocker from being tampered with in any which way. So when you're finished with the tamper protection, you can end it from the machine, you can end it from the server side. And the same with elevation, we're going to end both of them. So tamper protection is really just about stopping, altering, or removing ThreatLocker. Tied in with elevation and monitor only, you've got a whole bunch of diagnostics that you can do there. So really, you're going to use the maintenance modes for just that. When they first start, like I said, they start in learning. Go back to my computers page, and they're going to stay in learning until you change them to be secured. But once they are secured, that's when the others like installation, learning into a particular application, monitor only, they're going to come in handy for you. Advanced just takes you, it's just another way of getting to that window there, and you can go in. This just allows you to control what's happening on the machines at a very granular level, because you're doing it per machine as opposed to on a group level. So you don't have to go change the policy to permit or monitor only. You can do it on a single computer, and you can leave that computer in monitor only if you want. Now, story time. I used to work as an MSP, and one of my jobs was going on site to remediate any ransomware attacks. I was very good at that. I could go on site, I'd find the source, I'd initiate the recovery. Obviously, having decent backups and offsite backups really helps with that stuff as well. So I was very good at identifying it and getting everything back. And this one particular site I went on to had been hit with ransomware, and they were a graphic design company, and their graphics share got corrupted. It was about 6 or 7 terabytes worth of data. So I started the recovery, identified the machines, found out how it started, cleaned it up, got rid of it all, and started the recovery of their backups. They had backups, so they were only going to lose that day's work. Not the worst, but it took 4 days to recover their data due to the sheer size and the offsite nature of it, and the software we'd be using was a bit slow at the time. Can't remember the name of it, don't ask. But we restored them back. They got back and they lost a few days work, but overall could have been a lot worse. Now, as I worked at that MSP later on, we started using ThreatLocker, and I went on site to this customer to speak to him about using ThreatLocker. And his question, with the company turned around, well, why do I need ThreatLocker? It's like, do you remember your ransomware attack? You went, yes, that's why you need ThreatLocker. Obviously, as the MSP, I was trying to sell him on our services and get him to pay more money for it. He agreed, and he put it out, we rolled it out, we proved it, and we locked everybody down, and his developer kicked off. Developer knew better, and he didn't want to be locked down. He knew that he was secure. He wanted ThreatLocker removed. We advised against it, but the owner of the company agreed with the developer and said ThreatLocker should be removed from that computer. Now, I didn't remove ThreatLocker from that computer. I put it in monitor only, because if nothing else, at least there's logs. And a few months later, I got a phone call from the owner of that company, very, very angry because he'd been hit with ransomware. And he wanted to know how this could possibly happen. We promised him that he was secure. So I go on site, I do what I do best, and I go and tell him the news. And I said, the only machine that's been hit is your developers, because we left it in monitor only. I said, nobody else has been hit, it's all been blocked. But of course, the developer had full access to all of the shares and everything else. And I saw his face drop because his data had gone to about 12 to 14 terabytes at this point. And his question was very sheepishly asked, but how long is the data recovery going to take? Because he's thinking, I'm busy, I can't afford days off, days without people working. And I got to smile and say, no recovery time needed, only machine impacted was that machine. And I'm going to show you over the next couple of days how I did that. But I did that using ThreatLocker. And the reason I use this story as an example in the training is for a couple of reasons, really. One, it was my first real point as an MSP to finally get to smile smugly at a customer and tell them I told you so. Because we all know we want to. Users always know best. We want to tell them we told them so. The second reason I tell this story is because of the methods I used are so simple. And I'm going to show you them across tomorrow that you can do some. And Thursday, I'm going to show you the ones I did. It's clue here. Tomorrow we're covering ring fencing, and Thursday we're covering storage control. And the other reason is because obviously, just because one computer doesn't want to be, we should still take the steps that we need to. So we can still put it in monitor only and at least have the logging. Because when it first happened, the first thing I did was bring up the unified audit, and I was searching. I was searching for what had gone wrong. And it was very quick for me to find out what computer it was. If I'd just uninstalled ThreatLocker on that computer, it would have taken me slightly longer. Not much longer, because I knew full well from the second he told me that the most likely cause was the computer he didn't want ThreatLocker on. But it was nice to be able to do all that sort of as I was prepping to leave and go on site to it. So having monitor only is better than not having ThreatLocker, because at least you've got logs. Keeping ThreatLocker on the devices so that you can see them, and then taking the extra steps that I'm going to show over the next few days with ring fencing and storage control. They're important steps. And as I said, it was nice to be able to turn around to a customer and say, I told you so. Because in the end, the customers pay, or your users rely on you, because you might not be an MSP, you could be an enterprise, but as an IT professional, people rely on you to make sure they're secure. And they will tell you that they want you to make them secure. And then you'll be like, can I have a password reset? And they'll be like, oh, do I have to change my password again? Fine, password 2. They want you to keep them secure, but they don't want you to inconvenience them. And I worked with a company in Australia, and he fully embraced the password reset. I've never seen anybody be so excited for the password reset. And he's like, I think this is great. We should be being secure. I'm like, okay. And everyone else is like grumbling a little bit, but he's fine. And he's like, can I have an eraser, please? And somebody throws him a razor. He's wipes something out, erases something, and then he's writing something. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm just wiping out the old password and writing the new one on my laptop so I don't forget it. And he embraced the concept of changing the password every 30 days, I think we were doing for them, or 90 days, or something like that. But he was writing it in pencil on his laptop so that when it changed again, he could erase it and write the next one. It didn't even cross his mind that that wasn't secure. And I'm sure if you think about it, you've probably got a whole number of stories yourself going on site and having password policies. And these are the things that you kind of go, oh, okay. And then people are writing and sticking notes to their desktops or writing their Wi-Fi password on the wall for everybody to see. And people want you to tell them how to be secure, but they don't really want you to inconvenience them. It is our jobs as IT professionals, though, to keep pushing that security. There is a line between security and convenience. We will step over that line into convenience as needed, like with using Elevation. Elevation is a convenience product. Allowing people to run things as an administrator is not more secure, but using something like Elevation or privileged access management is more secure than having them as local admins because they need to run certain programs. But that's where we have to make sure we stay on as much on the line of secure as possible. So when it comes to password policies, we put in the complexity, we set it to reset every 90 days. Though I believe Microsoft are currently telling people they shouldn't reset their passwords ever. Yeah, it's a 365 thing. I still disagree with that. I don't know what other people's opinions on it are, but my personal opinion is your password should expire at some point. And of course, you shouldn't use the same one. But we're never going to get away from people, that human part of the triangle. We're going to put in the controls that they change the password every 90 days and they're going to write it on their laptops. So when somebody does say, oh, I don't want you restricting what I'm going, at the very least, monitor what they're doing, because it's a step in the right direction. You're staying as close to that secure. If you have to compromise, stay as close to secure as you can. And then when it all blows up and they start blaming you, which they will, you get to go, I told you so. And it's so much fun. I highly recommend it. And that is the end of my story for today. I will pick up that story and show some of the stuff that I used for it tomorrow. I will add one thing though. When it came to me giving advice after that, I said, I highly advise the customer locks down that computer, the dev has his machine locked down. The owner didn't disagree with me that time. And the dev had to just suck it up and deal with the security that he's supposed to deal with. It's very easy to get someone in your court once they've been hit with ransomware. But I mean, even now, everybody's aware of it. I mean, I don't agree in scare tactics, but I do agree with information and telling your customers that small customers are not exempt. Just because you only have 2 users doesn't mean that nobody wants to hack you. It just means that if they correct all your files, chances are you're going to pay the ransom because you're desperate. So informing your customers on just simple truths about the world, I don't disagree with that. Like I said, I would never do scare tactics. I don't think you should go in and go, people are coming for you. The Russians are marching down the doors and stuff like that. I don't agree with that. But at the same time, we have so many MSPs tell us when the Ukraine things first started that they were seeing massive increases in Russian IP traffic. Whether or not that was the Russians hacking them or everybody jumping on the bandwagon and just spoofing Russian IPs. Either way, there was an increase in attacks from Russian IPs. But information to your customers, telling them that small businesses are not going to be ignored by criminals, and advising them. And if they do insist you do something stupid, like leave something monitor only regardless, even though you said not to, take the extra steps that you can to make sure they're a bit more secured. Do I have any questions?
You do not currently have any questions. Last chance, if there's a question on something that we've covered today. Oh, here came one. Are you running this demo on your LAN? Can you give a general idea of the delay while using this product from an MSP perspective? A few seconds, a few minutes. Obviously, internet speeds and firewall speeds, et cetera, will contribute. Just curious on your input on that. And what do you recommend?
Okay. My demo is actually, it's not in the same office that I'm in. It's also not linked to the ThreatLocker data centers at all. I would never let anyone demonstrate anything with access to our data. So this is as close as you'll get to me demonstrating it in your own environment. Obviously, internet speeds can differ. Computers check in every minute, which is why it can take a minute. But they generally, there's not a massive amount. Policy download is probably the biggest part, but you only do that if you've made changes to the policies. So generally, the speed of your internet won't really impact the performance on what you're doing. If you have, like, dial up, you might notice the portal's quite unusable. In fairness, we did have somebody doing a demo once, and he kept complaining because his environment was slow. And ThreatLocker was actually, it was quite slow for him on the portal. And it turned out he'd limited his bandwidth on his VM to 16K. Now, he complained. I think he was trying to test something and forgot about it. But yeah, for the most part, today's internet, you're not really going to notice too much difference. But yes, the environment I'm in I'm remoted in. It is in Orlando, but it's not where I am, and it's not on the same LAN as my actual servers. No, they exist on a completely different LAN, different lines, different internet, different hardware, different cages, everything. So yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Are any of the features that you've shown today limited to any tiers of service?
So they are limited to the organizations, to the products. So what I've really demonstrated today is application control and elevation. I am going to be covering all the products, so I will cover like network access, storage control. They are separate products, but most people, not so much always the elevation, but most people tend to buy the full default deny ring fencing, which is the application control, and the storage control. They tend to buy them together. And a lot of people are adding in the elevation if you use it. If you don't have a need for elevation, obviously you're not going to add it. But if you do have a need for it, at least now you know how to use it, and also why you might need it. Because like I said, it is a convenience product. It's just if you have to have local admins, then adding on elevation is a massive bonus to you, because it means that you don't have to have local admins anymore. We don't have any local admins internally. Even I'm not a local admin on my own machine. No one's allowed to be a local admin. We're very strict on that. And those programs that do need elevation, occasionally I'll write a program that I'll give to everyone just so they can do some various changes and curiosity, see who questions it. If I need that elevated, I'll put a policy in for elevation on that. So you can elevate as you need to. You can do expiry dates on the policies and stuff like that. So it is convenient. It makes life easier to use elevation. But I mean, if you're already not having any local admins and you have absolutely no need to elevate any software, outside of the use of people who log in as an admin to do said software, then you probably don't have a need for elevation. It is an optional product, but it's there to make your life easier if you are in the need of it.
Thank you, Michael. How long should learning mode be ran before enabling secured mode on a workstation or server?
That is the question. And I'm actually going to call on Colin, because apparently my answer, people disagree. I think 7 days minimum, 2 weeks sort of on the upper end of that. But let's get the opinion of someone who actually does it for a living of onboarding people. Would you agree with that, Colin?
I definitely do. The first 7 days, typically, we learn as much as we need to get things going. The only other things we like to keep in mind, just depending on the client, there might be some instances where you have a tool, an update, or a process that runs once a month, every 6 months, once a year. So just keeping that in mind, the learning mode will capture absolutely everything you'll need in that period of time, but the outliers there are things that we can schedule maintenance for, as Michael has kind of displayed. But I agree with that. Typically 7 days is a great window of time to initiate that lockdown process. Outside of typical users, I personally would give maybe developers an extra week, just so we have the ability to make sure that they're set before we lock them down, because they are a bit more, well, power users than anyone else. But 7 days should be enough.
Speaking from experience, I think by power users, he means they complain more.
Exactly.
And I'm a developer myself, so I'm allowed to say that.
And tinker more.
Yes, they play with things. It's going to be the same for your own. If you're rolling out to your IT department or your own MSP first, you're going to be your worst case scenario, because you guys are not used to somebody telling you what to do. Even if it is you, and you go there, and you can get really, really secure. And we're going to talk more about that on the ring fencing, but our organization here is extreme. We take everything to the highest level that we possibly can. And I did kind of forget that and wonder why I couldn't RDP to a server, and then told my infrastructure team to fix the server. It was just one of the dev servers. And they're like, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's working fine. And I'd actually restricted my ability to RDP into the server. So yeah, we're quite extreme, but you're going to be your own worst nightmare. But 7 days for the most part. If you do end up with a piece of software that runs once a month, it gets blocked, somebody clicks request, you fix it. And there you go. Oh, thank you. And then you're fine. If you want to wait a month because you might run a software once a month, you're going to end up with more software installed. If you then go, oh, well, I'm still getting new stuff, I'll wait 2 months. Well, they've been able to install things for 2 months, and now they're installing more software. And then 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months. And we've seen it before. We've seen people go, I'll just leave them in learning, or I'll leave them in monitor only. And the audit's great. That dev had his machine in monitor only, and I got to see everything that the ransomware did to his computer. Very interesting if you like actually looking at ransomware logs, which at the time, I like I said, it was very good at. I found that preventative measures were much more fun though, or at least less heartbreaking as you're telling people that, you know, they might go out of business. But yeah, I mean, you can see everything that's going on in monitor only, but the longer you leave people to do things, the more they're going to do. So you kind of just have to pick a point and go for it. But I'd like to remind everyone, if you are in the early process, your solutions engineer is going to guide you through this. They're going to say, hey, it's been a week. Let's have a look. Let's lock down some computers. And you can go, or you could just turn around to them and go, right, let's lock them all down today. They'll be like, okay, well, let's check, make sure, okay, this is what the noise we could have dealt with. This is some custom rules. And I'll go through custom rules. I've mentioned them a few times. They're basically methods of covering updates before they get there. But we'll cover how to do them, when to do them, and all that tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, we internally, we lock down as soon as the machine is installed. My latest machine, I actually created a new group and tested everything because I wanted to see what it was like. And I locked down my computer before anybody had even learned into the group. I created all the policies I needed ahead of schedule. And it worked fine. My computer installed fine. I installed everything I needed outside of the ability to RDP to a server. But other than that, it worked fine. So yeah, it really comes down to you, but standard would be 7 days.
Thank you, Michael. One last question. It's about the approval center. Do you mind answering it today?
Yeah.
It doesn't go too in-depth.
No, because yeah, I mean, well, go on, you can read it.
Okay. In the approval center, are there any checks and balances that say the user requesting the elevation is actually the user of the computer and not a shoulder surfer of the said user? So he says, he guesses, as a technician, you could pick up the phone and ask if they actually requested that elevation. You know, just trying to make sure it's not a disgruntled employee or someone trying to circumvent that security layer.
So I will cover requests in more detail later, but the answer to that question is very, very simple. Windows tells us who's logged in. We don't know that that person is actually Michael, because I could rename my user to be Danny Jenkins and then put a request in and see if anybody just approves it because Danny. So no, you can't see if that is actually the person. You can see if it's the person logged in, because it will say the username that is running under. So you will get, they are logged in as that user. It's just if somebody else is logged in as that user, you wouldn't know that it was somebody else. Now, the steps to take when you're approving something, and this is where I will reiterate multiple times, you need to make sure that what you're approving is a logical thing to approve. If a user is requesting elevation on PowerShell, your default response should be why. If they're requesting access to Office and you haven't provided it, your default response should be why. No matter what they're asking for, your default response should always be why. We took on a new sales engineer this week, a guy in Ireland, and he requested Visual Studio Code. And the infrastructure team's default question was, why? And we asked him and he's like, oh, it's my preferred notepad editor. That's how he edits a note. He used to be a developer. And that's how he normally edits text documents. Thank you, notepad documents, text documents. To which the response was no. You can use Notepad or Notepad++ because they're the approved ones. But you have to ask why. Because if something is rejected, if something is denied once you've locked down, there is 3 reasons that somebody's clicking request. 1, you forgot to approve something that you should have. So why was it missed? That's probably a question for your person who's managing them. Why have they deleted something that was already learned? Was it not learned? Et cetera, et cetera. But why that? The second thing is it could be a new piece of software. Well, new pieces of software really should be approved by the IT people. So why do they need the new software? What's it for? Where have you got it from? Is it really legitimately software? You already have Adobe Reader permitted. Why are you trying to run Adobe Reader honestly? .exe. Questioning why they're trying to run something. That should be a question to people. Now, sometimes you'll see and you'll go, okay, it's an update. It's pretty obvious. And that answer would be why. And that could be the third thing. It's updated. But it still comes down to why you're getting a request, because a couple of good custom rules should mean that you're not getting those requests for updates. So you're back down to just somebody didn't do something right, or somebody's trying to run something that you haven't approved. Either way, you should verify it before you approve it. And especially when it comes to elevation, because people will always try and elevate things. I mean, Google Chrome, when you first install Google Chrome, it asks you to run as an administrator. If you say no, it'll install as a user. So you might find the users clicking requests because they want to install Google Chrome. So you'll probably find that a lot of your elevation requests, you're going to say no to. Maybe not at the start because you'll be getting used to them, but once you've got those policies down, you won't be really getting elevation requests you're going to need to say yes to, unless you are the one or an engineer is the one doing it.
Thank you, Michael. They're saying great explanation. That's good advice that he was looking for. Makes him think back to the triangle. The IT people have to be diligent as well because they're also human. So thank you.
Yes. often very easy to forget that IT people are human. Or that users are. But yes, it is something, always vigilant, always question everything. Be paranoid. Then your users don't have to be as paranoid because you're being paranoid for them. Okay.
It looks like that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We will pick up the same time tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard, and I suppose it's Eastern Daylight now, but Eastern Time anyway. Tomorrow, we are going to cover the unified audit, basically how you can use it to your advantage, what you're looking for when you're going through those audit reviews. I'm going to get someone to play with this computer so that they can run some stuff that I haven't seen. And we can have that learned, and we can do other things through that. We're going to go through custom rules tomorrow, ring fencing and tags. Ring fencing and tags kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, we'll talk about ring fencing, and I'll talk more about some of the ways that you can prevent that developer from getting hit with ransomware, even if he doesn't want to be restricted.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mandy, and thank you, Colin.